here.
Morning, Jeff.
Really well. Adam's been here doing great. We're able to hire another part-timer. So,
I saw you were
it's where we get to flexibility in certain items. There's times where we might get overflow, then we get away on the side. And we're at limitation of storage.
you were saying.
Yeah. We used to be able to take clothes. And now it's just, we don't have the room, we don't have the people to separate it. We take like jackets that'll fit our business. Well, we've got St. Matt's Closet down the street. I'm pretty bummed to hear one of the Methodist churches goes down there Main Street. That's kind of tough. Oh my goodness, we have been so blessed with food, especially like the food products. We just got 10 cases of stuff. People will be like, "Ma'am, people out in the woods, they can't wait because it's meat. And it's not just meat, it's salted meat. So, yeah, well, it's got to be used by Dana, of course. Used by Jesus. One of the top scans.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was into like
So, antibiotics are potentially harmful. Some.
Oh, are they? I didn't know.
I've lived with party system my entire life. My mom, my dad.
How are you?
Morning, Bill.
Good morning. What's the word first? The candidate has not received payment.
This is the email. Is that the right one? That's what you shared it with him.
ST. Yep. Banister, BANISTER @gmail.com.
This was this.
Is it his phone?
I can copy the invitations and
So what's the plan, you guys, just now, this is gonna be remote?
Yeah.
Or all, and how
Yeah,
many candidates is it?
It's only one. We had 2 candidates, but the one candidate does have a master's in the library, but he hasn't worked for 4 years after it in the right position, I think. So anyway, Tim's working on getting the librarians from the state. So we're only going to do one today. Hopefully we're going to have another one.
Good. All right, thank you.
Carol, can you go ahead and send that again to him? To the same email?
I can put multiple ones in, that we don't send yours to.
Send it to my team and you guys can forward it. Let me just have this. It's got a lot of spoon. Yes, it is in there.
I'm sorry. For the second one, I didn't think so, just before the emails are, I'll see.
If you do a copy invitation.
We sent it from the ROC group. Figure out why he's doing it, he wasn't able to send them an invitation.
John, can I see you for a second? We're having trouble,
Getting on Zoom?
sending the invites, so.
Okay. Getting people invited into or
Yes.
getting registered? Or getting them to actually receive the invite?
Yeah, so this is the managed meetings, and
Yeah.
then we've got the emails in here.
Yeah, and they didn't get to the people they were supposed to. I had the same trouble yesterday with what I was attempting to do. So if it's a possibility, if you have the ability to do it real quick, take your copy of the invitation, send it to a phone, and then text it to them if they don't
Okay.
receive a text.
That's what we just sent it to Kari, so
Yeah.
I think she's
She's on.
getting it to
Okay.
the candidate.
Yeah, that's what I had to do yesterday, was text it to them.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sure, because everything else on here seems, the meeting set up, the emails, right?
yeah. And it was the first time I ever ran into that, you know, where you just set everything up, just thought your invitation was going out, and nobody received it.
Did you
Good.
get it?
Yep.
You're all set.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 10:01. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We will start with roll call. Bonnie Lawrence. She's not here. Kari Kohlman, I'm here. Peggy Brotzke. Here. John DeAngelis.
Here.
Chris VanBelle.
Here.
Carol Brown. She's not here yet. And Bill Marquardt.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. So prayer and pledge was not on the agenda, however, it is in our bylaws to be on the agenda. So, Peggy, would you like to lead us in prayer and John lead us in pledge? Is that okay? Or Chris, would you like to lead us in prayer? Chris, why don't you lead us in prayer and then we'll have John.
Heavenly Father, today we thank you that we have the opportunity to serve you in this beautiful community. We pray that all our actions glorify you and that you bless us through this meeting. Thank you, Heavenly Father, again. I pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Additions and deletions. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second, John. Second by Peggy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to our first public comment time. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak?
I'll speak. Leslie Getz, Mayfield Township. I just wanted to say I'm glad you finally have a viable candidate. I know you're probably excited about that as well.
Okay. I'll close public comment time. We will move into the interview. The interview is set to start at 10:15, so we will wait for that time. I do want to remind the public that this is an interview between the board and the candidate. This is a time for us to ask questions. The public is merely spectators; they are not participants in the interview. So I do ask that you please be quiet during it, and if there are any outbursts or anybody speaking from the public, you will be asked to leave. Okay? So we will wait until 10:15. I know that Stephen is ready. Stephen Banister. He's ready for the interview, but I told him around 10:15 to log on, so I don't know if he's waiting to log on and he's ready for him.
I think if I start, it will start, but I can test it and see.
You should be able to keep him in a waiting room should he appear second.
Before then,
I believe so.
to say I apologize for being late. I was waiting for the clerk to get into the township office to swear me in for this new term. And she did have trouble printing it. Anyway, that's why I'm late.
While we're waiting, should we discuss how we want to go about asking questions?
I think what I'm going to do is have him introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, and then after that, we will go around and I'll have each person ask whatever questions they have, and when they're finished, we'll just kind of move on down, if that sounds okay. Sure. And then afterwards, I can close out, ask if he has any questions for us. And
So we'll ask all the questions that we have.
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. Instead of bouncing around, I think it would be good for each person ask your full set of questions, whatever you have. And
Okay, thank you.
he's anticipating more.
Yeah, me too. That would be nice, sure.
Right.
Yeah, well, you have to. Now, for these meetings, we don't have a minimum amount of time.
The radius 2 minutes,
Well,
depending at the beginning.
but the actual,
Yeah, no.
you know,
Or-
I've been in meetings where we has to be
Oh,
open for at
I
least
have
4
heard
minutes.
that meetings will do a half hour, and that's it.
Cool.
There's another library, I believe in the state, that does that, like that.
Oh, they'll max
They
it
say
out.
you get 30, yeah, 30 minutes.
Makes sense to keep moving along.
He's ready.
You saw it at the conference over there.
Kara, he's ready, so we can.
He should just be able to click the link and it'll bring him right in. Because there's no waiting room or anything, I'll double check, but yeah, he's over here, so.
Hello, Mr. Banister.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Yes. So your resume is quite impressive. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
To start out, if you could just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, my original career choice was to be an attorney. When I graduated from Nicholls State University back in the 1980s, I went straight into law school at Mississippi College School of Law in Jackson, Mississippi, and I did that for about almost a year. After a while, I realized either A, wasn't what I wanted to do really, or B, maybe I needed to do something else for a while. So I left law school and went back to school to become a school teacher. Education kind of runs back in the family. My mom was a school teacher by the time she retired, 41 years. My dad was a teacher one time in high school, and he went on and got his doctorate to become a college professor at the school I went to, Nicholls State. And then I got my credentials, went on and taught school for about a year, and then I went back to get my school library certification. So I did that for about 4 years in New Orleans, a place called Archbishop Shaw High School on the West Bank in New Orleans, if you're familiar with that area. And the other one was Archbishop Hannon High School in Miro, which is down in St. Bernard Parish. Later on, that school was destroyed by Katrina, and they moved it to a different place, like in a place called St. Tammany, which is north of Lake Pontchartrain. Then I went for my master's at the same time in library science, and I did that over about 2.5, 3 years. Then I went to Nicholls State, back to my alma mater, and I worked there for 6 years as head of acquisitions and collection development, and then in a couple of years became assistant library director, which was a great opportunity. And basically, since that time frame, I've been in library administration. And then I took my first director's position in Texas in 2002, 2-year school. So as you can see, I've grown a lot, especially on the academic side for a number of years. And I spent 8 years in North Dakota at Minot State University, where I was director, and I was heavily involved in the State Library Coordinating Council. I was a vice chair and chair. We did what is the North Dakota legislature gives grant money to the state library. And so I was heavily involved in that. I really enjoyed it because it gave me actually a chance to visit a lot of the public libraries throughout North Dakota. So everything from small one-room libraries with population center of less than like 1,000 people, all the way up to something like Fargo, North Dakota, which had large urban downtown libraries, population over 100,000. Got to know a lot of different people across the state. Got to know the governor, Dalrymple, who was a Republican governor. He was one who appointed me in 2013 for the position. I got to know Kirsten Bestler. She is a superintendent of education. In fact, I think currently she's with the Department of Education currently in the Trump administration. So. And we also know quite well the Congresswoman from North Dakota. And so we've gotten to know a lot of people over the years, enjoyed North Dakota, but then came back south to Tallahassee, where I was director. And Tallahassee State College, used to be Tallahassee Community College. I was director there for 4 years. And I was heavily involved in the Members Council, which is part of the Florida Virtual Library Consortium. And so I've got a lot of my energies focused on that sort of thing, the consortium environment, the state level type institutions, things like that I've really focused on over the years. And so about 4 years ago, I decided to do something completely different in my career. I decided to move into the public library directorship position. And at the same time, I also became working for a private equity firm. So what it is the name of the company at the time was Avenue Insights and Analytics. They're predominantly an IT company, but they decided to go into the managed library spaces place. And so they actually ones that hired me, along with the city of Germantown, along with the library board. So I actually have several different stakeholders I report to. I report to a board. I report to the city, and I report to my immediate boss, who's in Oregon. I see him once in a while. So it's been a very interesting balancing act between all those different constituencies. Plus, of course, I have to take care of things with all the internal operations of multiple libraries. I'm also involved. We have our Regional History Center that I'm also over, and I'm involved with the library in Bartlett. Also, we had gotten a contract for that particular services back in 2024, and I was kind of like involved in closing that deal for them. So I've done the sales, among all the other things. About 18 months ago, and I've been thinking for a while about going back for my master's in business administration, my MBA. So I'll tell you what happened was, first and foremost, I'm a library director, love doing it, sometimes really enjoy doing. But I also wanted to be able to grow my opportunities and also help me with what I do, because I deal a lot with financials. I deal with KPIs, key performance indexes. I'm looking at how we can improve our services and looking at analytics. I'm really big into assessment and analytics to help drive decision-making processes. And so recently was enrolled in the last 6 months or so. I'm into my third course right now. I'm in an advanced accounting class, and I've really enjoyed it. In fact, a lot of the things I have learned over the last few months applies very well to the environment I'm in, because I am constantly working with spreadsheets. I work with 2 budgets. I work with the City of Germantown has an operating budget I work out of, and then I have a budget for the company I work for, which is really this new name is Numo. They had merged with several companies. So I'm constantly working with 2 budgets. I'm working with several different locations. I have a staff of around 26 or so at this time. We're open about 68 hours a week. We circulate over 300,000 print books a year out of the library, out of the main library. Another 130,000 transactions we do with ebooks. And our programming rates since I've been there in 2022 has, especially on the children's side, has tripled. We've gone from about 3,000 to almost 9,000 in just about 2.5 years. So we've really worked hard to really drive growth and development of the library programs and our resources. But, I've enjoyed being a librarian. It was not my natural one I was going to pick as a career. Like I said, I was going to law school, I had my history degree, and my professor said, go to law school, that's what you want to do. And do I probably miss it sometimes? Yes, I still like reading things like the contracts and things like that. But I also feel like in my calling, I get to help people find information, help them figure out what they need to know. I'm here to give them assistance and give them opportunities to learn about things and to lower barriers to being able to find that information. That's all really critical for this to be successful. What I try to do from my perspective is that I'm a neutral arbiter in the sense of making decisions. What I do is I rely upon the library board to take lead on policies, and I'm here to implement those policies. And my position is to develop a strategy for where we want to go as an organization, and I think that's really key. And one of the things we did since I've been there in about the first 18 months or so was we brought on board Rethinking Libraries, actually out of Wisconsin. And so we brought in some consultants, and we actually developed a strategic planning document for the first time in the history of this particular library location. So I was really happy to do that. I really believe in that type of thing, and to have a very strategic vision of where you want to go as an organization, among other things. And I've affected a lot of different changes. And I like being in the public space because I feel like I can do more in the sense of being able to affect some change. But the way I do my management strategy is I do a lot of listening. I listen what the patrons want, what the board wants, so that way I can figure out what's the best path forward. I believe in being as transparent as I can with my leadership skill sets, and if you ask any of my staff members or anything, they like that because I'm very attuned to what their needs are, attuned to what the patrons are. I work very closely with the Friends group, among other things. So It's a lot of listening and a lot of communicating. That's really what it comes down to in a position like this, and a lot of forward thinking, leading into 4 directions, among other things. But I enjoy it. It's something I'm glad I went into, but I wouldn't change it. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to tell you a little bit about my story.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think now we're going to enter into questions. So each board member, I believe, has questions.
Okay.
And so we'll just start on one end and kind of work our way around. So
Sure.
board members, if you could just introduce yourself to Stephen, and then go ahead with your questions, and we'll go from there. So we'll start with you, Chris.
Lovely. Hi, my name's Chris VanBelle, and I'm thrilled to be on this board. I just have a few questions. So in today's day and age, how can a public library remain relevant and valuable to the general public when everything is right here, and people can get their books, their reading material right in the palm of their hand? So what are your ideas about that?
Well, I've been hearing that particular comment since about 2000.
Right.
It's like, well, we got all these things now on my computer or my iPhone. All the information I've read, my anecdotal experiences I've seen, the library to me is not only as relevant as it was in the past, in some ways more relevant, because people need that connection that these devices unfortunately don't always give us. People still want to have the ability to get together. One of the things that I always hear this term in the field called third space. So we're kind of what's considered sometimes a third space, and that means a place where people can either socially congregate, study, work, do research. Like we have our high school students, even college students who come use our resources on a pretty regular basis. We have tutoring involved, is heavily involved in that. Programming, yes, we've got a lot of programming goes on. We have hundreds of programs a year that we're generating through our facilities. Everything you can name, from financial, will planning, ham radio. I took a ham radio class recently, which I really enjoyed, so I can get my license to be a ham radio operator. You just name it. I've worked with meteorologists who come in, and when I was especially in the Gulf Coast, I had a hurricane workshop every year when I was in Texas at our library. We brought in one of the local meteorologists, Shelley Sink from Beaumont, Texas, and she would give, and then I got somebody from the National Hurricane Center to be involved. So I'm always looking for ways to connect different resources and people to the community, to the school, to what have you, because we're evolving. And then even though I see my circulation numbers growing in the ebook area, or we use Libby, when I use Libby there, and it's grown, the amount of materials that we circulate at our library it's still growing. I mean, we have 300,000 items moving out of the building. We have a population of about 40,000. Pretty impressive, if you ask me. I've been in the field for quite a few years now, and I guess I haven't been in academia for so long. It was like the first thing I stepped in here and looked around, like, wow, you guys really do have a lot of books you circulate through here. So that's a very good sign. People still want that physical format in their hands, particularly on, let's say, if you want to get a fiction book or something that's relaxing. I will admit I do use Libby quite a bit, but I also sometimes like to have a regular print material in my hand to be able to go through and read it and what have you. And so I don't see that changing. I don't see that going away. It may be for academics, it could, because the nature of the collections and what they need is different. Public libraries, no. I think we'll always will have that need. Children particularly, they love to have their books. So that's a good thing. Less screen time, especially at a younger age, is critical. All the studies show how that can have impacts on development. And I mean, I have so many devices with screens, it's crazy. But it's as much as we can try to limit that as much as possible by offering other types of resources that students can use and teachers and kids can use. And that's why we have the collection we have. We make sure it's appropriate, age appropriate, reflective of what the community standards want, that sort of thing. Our programming is just continues to, go banga. It just goes up and up and up. I always get comments from the library director. Her name is Lisa Platt. She's over in the Colleyville Public Library. They're about 5-10 minutes away from Germantown, and she actually lives in Germantown, and she gets all the emails. She's always commenting to me how impressive we are with our programming in Germantown. And all we want to do is try to continue to expand. In fact, it's getting to the point now where we're starting to look at our facilities. Our building was built in the late 1990s. It's about 33,000 square feet. And at some point, we're going to have to start identifying where we're going to grow it, because we're maxing out the space, and that's a good problem to have. And we've had a super supportive friends group that gives us to the tune of $100,000 a year from the bookstore sales. And so it's a very dynamic place. It is, I think, if anything, we need more space. We're adapting our space to be as more effective and efficiently as possible to reflect what the needs are, while still maintaining our collections and our growth. But honestly, we're always going to need that type of environment. We're going to need people who be there to assist people with their answers and their questions. And it's so pleasing to me to see when I walk into the building how busy it is. How many times during the day I walk out to the parking lot, it's packed with cars. In fact, we need more parking. So, but that's a good problem to have. So I don't see that anywhere changing anytime in, I think, for a long time to come.
That's awesome.
Personally.
My last question is, now, what actions by a library do you believe most risk losing public trust?
I'm sorry, what about the public trust? I'm sorry, you broke up that last part. Would you mind repeating that last bit?
Which actions by a library do you believe most risk losing public trust? Because,
Not listening to the needs of the community, listening to the needs of the board. I think that's very important to reflect what their needs are. That is something I've worked very hard and very diligently. That's why we did a strategic planning process. We had focus groups come in with local users, the library patrons, city, Germantown, anybody like that. We did a retreat where we brought in a large group of people. Some were board members, some were community members, but we were able to have come on board. So you can do surveys, you can do one-on-ones, to see what we're doing, reflect back on what they're doing, make sure our policies are in alignment with what is the needs of the board and the community. Those are the critical things, because as director, I'm one who's responsible for overall operations. And I also believe it's really important to have that transparency, to take care of those things. And I had somebody recently come talk to me about our magazine collection, and he was saying, we used to have a lot more. And I said, I realized that we did. And I said, actually, you reached out to me at a good time, because we were looking at switching to a different company to provide our journals and our magazines, and we're trying to expand our collection. So we had a good 30-minute discussion. I made notes and things to add what we're trying to do. In fact, I'm switching over to something called EBSCO, and so I'm going to have a meeting this week with that company, and this year we're going to switch over to that particular provider, because I wasn't pleased with the company we had before. So those are the sort of things I'm looking for. I need feedback, how to improve services, and that sort of thing, and how does that align with our changes that we're trying to make. And then when he walked away and shook my hand after, he said, I really appreciate you listening, and thank you so much for trying to make this better. And I said, you're welcome. So a lot of it's just good listening skills and be able to take time to do that. And that's the things I like to do as director, is how can we make things better, and how do we accommodate the needs of the community and continue that. And I think as long as you do that, that's how you build trust. And to this day, I know I've done that. The community reflects that, and when I hear back from everybody, I hear back from the mayor, I hear back from the city, I hear back from the friends group, from the board members, and so on. And I think that's where it really is important. That's the big driver to be a successful library organization in today's environment.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm
Hi, I'm Peggy Brotzke, and I am entering the second year of my 4-year term as appointed by my township. My first question is, how would you balance serving a diverse community if residents strongly disagree on social or cultural issues?
Well, that is something that's pretty common for most library systems today. That's not unusual. I've heard that on several different occasions. We've been able to, the most part, avoid that because in our community, I did several actionable things since I've been there. Some years back, before Avenue took over, there was another company called LS&S. They're pretty big in the library management space. And one of the things that I had heard when I came on board was that all their collection development was taking place in California, because that's where they were basically based out of. So that was one of the reasons why I think Germantown went with Avenue. And one of the things I wanted to make sure was that when I came on board, I wanted to make sure our collection development efforts were really in alignment with what the needs are for the community and what the needs are for what the board sees as important, and trying to make sure we're keeping an even hand on how we're making those decisions. And so we did that. We actually revised our collection development policy. We worked with the library board very closely on that. We made some adjustments to be more reflective of that. And the other thing is I moved one of my I had a full-time librarian. She worked part-time in reference, but her skill set is really our acquisitions and collection development abilities. And she had been with the library for over 20 plus years. So one of the first things I did was, her name is Ann Wallace, was I moved her back into a full-time technical services position where her focus was to zero in on our collection development and our book ordering through our company called Brodart is the vendor we use to make sure it's reflective of what our needs are within the community, so we can be as balanced as possible. I think she's done an exceptionally good job. I've gotten really good feedback from across the community about that. And recently we added in something called BibZ Analytics. It's a tool that we're able to purchase through Brodart. It uses an analytical methods to help us with selection of materials. And it bases it on a number of different factors, such as the type of books we buy, how many do we buy of this type, is it a hard copy, is it, what kind of children's type material is it something that we've regularly used. It looks at our circulation transactions through our Polaris library system to make sure we're purchasing materials that are reflective of the needs of the community. And so that way we're staying in as much as possible, balance, equal, selection tools, so that way we're making sure we're building our collection in a way that fits very well what are the needs of the community. And of course we have a variety of different opinions. And so it's like a bit of a threading of a needle to some extent. So I really do believe that's really important. It helps to eliminate issues that it comes to that sort of item that could come up, and the same thing with our programming, and again, reflective of the needs of the community. And so we have adjusted program accordingly and making sure we still have that ability. We're, reaching out to, like you said, diverse audiences and things like that. So we're always making sure we're doing that along with what are the needs of the majority of the community. And, it's fine. And I think that's the biggest thing is for listening and making sure, the board is included in how we are doing things. And we've had, when it comes to that sort of thing, actually fairly minimal issues. And 4 years I've been here. I can't know a few times people have had comments. Sure, actually it has. But that was more when I first got on board and I was looking at our policies, and we've made some adjustments on how we were doing things, and I think that's helped a lot. And we go through a process where when we select materials, we review them, make sure they look like are doing what they need to do, and they're reflective of the collection and reflective of our collection development policy. The board gets updated at every one of our board meetings to let them know how things are going. I can get them as much granular information as they need or how little they need. I usually try to give them like an analytics of where we are with our ordering, our analytics of materials that are being borrowed, what our analytics are for our ebooks, and so on. We also added RFID recently for inventory control, security, and checkouts. And we got self-service machines now in the building that seems to be very popular, particularly with our children. Because mom and dad will be over there, and of course, the kids want to say, we have a self-check in the children's department, and of course, at that age, they have to have parents there, but they take the card from mom and dad and say, let me do it, and they just love that machine. So they love to be able to use these self-checks and to see that happen. So it's fun to watch them come in and find what they want. We just recently did a big Halloween Bazaar program for the first time. We had about 450 children and parents attend that particular program. It's something new we just added. And I got nothing but phenomenal feedback on that. It's something we just added on. We're adding on more programming after, in the evenings. We're going to be doing a how-to festival in the next couple of months. And I don't know if you ever heard something called Touch a Truck. So we're working on that right now, where we're going to bring in EMS equipment, fire department equipment, and so on. And then we're going to have a food truck there. We're going to have, that's going to be during the spring and summer, and we're going to do something like that. We've done it years ago, but after COVID, it kind of got stopped. So we're trying to ramp up some additional programming. So that's the key. We're trying to reflect what other needs are. Everybody's age group, from children up to seniors, and we have a fairly substantial senior population. So we have a lot of programming that accommodates their interests and needs, and we have a lot of things that are available for them in the way of services. And so everybody is important for the success of a public library. And so we're doing our best we can to adapt to those specific needs, and also just listen. And if somebody has a new idea, then definitely we will consider it, and that will be brought forward not only my staff, but then even the board and other entities. So, and we're always looking for additional financing opportunities through things like Kiwanis and Germantown Leadership, and right now we're working on 2 federal grants. We have one for a big READ project, summer READ project, and the other one is a digitization grant, and both are tied into America 250. So there's a historical connection to our American history background. So it's exciting, it's a good time, I'm enjoying it.
Thank you for that thorough answer. In fact, you answered a couple of my other questions through that, so thank you very much. I did. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, okay. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the questions I was going to ask is I noticed on your resume that your current position and your prior 2 positions, one of the things you list is that you revamped the collection development policy. So you went into that quite a bit in your first answer. Is there anything you want to add to that? Like, why did you feel that was necessary to do it? And can you just give a few highlights of what you did to revamp it?
Okay, would you mind repeating that last part about the revamp? You broke up just a little, I'm sorry.
Yeah, can you give a few highlights of what you did to revamp the collection development?
Oh, well, what I did particularly here is that the collection development policy we had in this at Germantown hadn't been updated since about 2013. And so what we did was that we went and looked at what the latest ones that were out there to reflect. And I worked actually with Dana Brassia. She's from Pneumo. She's also a librarian. So she and I worked together to come up with some updates for that. Just to make sure it was reflective of whatever the current legal words are for that, and the freedom to read and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that. And also I wanted to make sure we had an updated policies on anybody when it comes to challenging materials. I wanted to make sure we had everything done up to date. Now, that particular thing had not been updated in 15 years or something like that. And I said, one of the things I learned in library school is that you always want to have all that kind of like planned out ahead, make sure it is ready to go in case you do need it. I want to be proactive because I want to make sure we have some procedures in place to make sure we can handle that internally and also with the board as needed. And so that was one of the things we did. And we, of course, brought it to the board and to Lisa, who's over the city administrator for Germantown. And we made sure we had everything correctly done at that point. And then we went before the board for them to review, and they liked what they had, and they signed off on it. And then, like I said, we wanted to make sure our collections are reflective of the needs of the community. So we're just constantly looking at all that and getting feedback. So that way we're having a balanced approach for everybody and making sure we're getting what people want. And, you know, not being political, just trying to be focused on the professional, on whatever our needs are. So I put that hat on and figure out what we need to do. So it's, you know, as long as you talk to people and do the feedback and keep things current, and because I like to look at the policies pretty regularly, every 1 year or so, just to see how we are. We're doing some updates on our patron behavior policies right now. We're going to make some changes with that. And I'm working with the city attorneys to make sure whatever we have in our documentation is reflective of what the current law for Tennessee is, because some of the stuff has not, a few of those things have not been updated in a number of years. So we're going back through some of those to make sure we are in alignment of what are the needs for the city, what are the needs for the library, and how they're reflective of what the current state of the law is in the state of Tennessee. And as you know, things move and change all the time, so it's good to have that ability to continue that process of revising things, updating things. I like to keep that. One of those things I make notation on my calendar to make sure those changes continue to be looked at as needed, but I also think it's just something good to bring back every once in a while for review, just to say we're staying current with what we have and what's going on with the ongoing political and legal situation throughout the area. So, and it's worked well for us, very, very well.
Thank you. I just have one more question. What role should parents have in determining what their children access in the library?
Oh, yeah, well, at the end of the day, yes, that's very important for us to make sure we're in alignment with what the parents need. And that's why it's so important to get that feedback, verbal feedback. We have comment forms, so they can always submit that too, or they can come and talk to me or talk to our children's librarian, and we'll see what their needs are. We can always compile that information together and see what action items we may need to develop from that. And if there's something that maybe is impacting our policies, then we want to make sure we bring that to the board so they can have that discussion and have that open forum in case we need to have that discussion. And at the end of the day, the board will help make those decisions, or we'll make those decisions about where we need to go concerning policy, especially with children. And we're very careful about that where we are. We're a fairly conservative community, so that's something we're always trying to make sure we're reflective of what their needs are. And like I said, I've had very little in the way of, the only time I had these measures, we actually closed, we have a fire truck in the children's department. It's a big wooden one that was built in the 1990s. First year I was there, some child actually fell off of it and hurt themselves. So we actually closed it for a little while we were trying to figure out how we might be able to improve the safety of it. That was the time I really had to deal with some controversy. But we eventually got somebody come in. Actually, there's actually a flooring company came in on their dime and fixed the flooring around the fire truck. And then that way we have extra padding, so if somebody falls off of it, the child won't get hurt. But that was the only real big controversy we had in the children's department. But once we fixed it, that was it. I mean, I didn't hear any more after that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name's John DeAngelis. I want to thank you for your interest in Lapeer District Library. Your answers are so thorough. You've touched on about all my questions, but I'm going to ask you some questions anyway, but I'm pretty sure I know the answers to them. How do you define age-appropriate material, and who do you think should make that determination?
When it comes to library materials?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what did you say? We of course, the library or the librarians, we're using a variety of different collection development tools. to select the materials. I did think I'll allude to the fact that we're using something called BIPSy Analytics, which is a tool that we purchased through Brodart to help us with building a balanced collection that will be what the people, children and parents and adults would want. We reflect back to what the library collection development policy is, which of course in turn is reflective of what the needs or desires of the library board. So we're as transparent as anybody wants. We can develop lists to make sure, if there's any questions. And one of the things we do is that, and we did that not long after I got there, is that we went back through our collection after I got on board, and we basically see what are the age appropriate type items do we have in the children's collections versus the older young adult kind of things. And so if there was any questions, then we would have, we pulled them and we would examine them very carefully to make sure that is age appropriate, because what happened was that the previous company purchased a lot of materials that probably wasn't as reflective of the needs of the community, because they're based out of Riverside, California. And so since we were able to in-house our collection development processes, then we basically went through and looked at all our items to make sure this is okay, and we're using a variety of different ways, tools, or means to measure what we need to do. We also looked at circulation numbers and things like that. And so we adjusted our collections accordingly. We also needed to weed our collection because some of it was pretty dated. And our shelves were maxed out, especially in the young adult and children's area. We really needed to do some weeding to get the materials, some of those materials out, because they were dated or used, and children's materials get used quite a bit, get damaged or just worn very quickly. And so we were able to go through that process, and those books will go over to the Friends bookstore for them to sell. And so we've been able to, continue to adjust our collection accordingly to make sure it's appropriate to what our end user is. And I think as a result, from what I've been able to deal with in the last nearly 4 years, is that I get nothing but good comments about how we've been very proactive in making sure we're serving the mission of the community and the library appropriately. And that way everybody still has access to information, but it is still where parents will have a say in what the drivers are for those types of things that they're looking for their age-appropriate children, for depending on the age, and the programming, among other things. And our numbers show it's going up. We were, like I said, over 3,000. About 18 months ago, it was about 5,600. And just past fiscal year, it was 8,500. So our programming numbers have doubled and continue to double almost. So I'm very happy where we're going. And I think that's the thing is that we're listening, we're discussing, we're transmitting information, we're getting it to the board or other ениties. And I'm always I have an open door policy. So people are more than welcome to come in. Let's have a discussion. Let's see where things stand and if we need to make some changes, and what are the actionable items, and then moving forward from there. And that way everybody has a chance to discuss it, and usually that seems to be what we need to do, and we can move on. And that's what I want to do, because I want to grow and develop the library to the best library it can be with what we have, with our resources that reflects the community. And it's exciting when we see people come in and they're happy with what's going on, and at the end of the day, I'm happy.
Thank you. Just one more question.
Yes.
Can you describe a time when you disagreed with the board's decision, and how did you handle that?
You're going to find this really wild, but I have not had that issue with our board. I mean, we seem to be on the same page on trying to do it, and if there isn't anything like that, we talk it out, and we've been able to move on. Actually, at one time, this is not so much the board, but this was the Friends board. They put a lot of money into a one space, and we made some adjustments on how we were doing things with one of our spaces, which was a reading room in the back of the library. And I was very nervous about it wasn't very visible anymore. We put in a different room in front of it, and which the Friends Group paid for. And so, so we made some adjustments we actually closed it, turned it into a conference room, and updated the Friends meeting room. And I think because I did it very quickly, I didn't say, well, why did we do this? But the chairman of the board for the library was like, hey, this is great. The chair of the Friends Group, after we seen what we did, Stephen, you made the right decision. We look like we may have had an incident occur, and I was very proactive in getting it taken care of. And now everybody's like, this is great, glad you did it. So, that's about the only thing I can ever think of. And there was not a real disagreement, it's just more discussion, and they see what my plans were, and okay, well, let's do it. And we did it, and so we moved on, and now everybody's it's a good place. And they said you made the right call on that, because I was thinking about security, making sure everybody was safe, and I'm very, very, very proactive on that, especially since I did go to law school, so I see things a lot through that type of lens when it comes to making decisions. And as a former school teacher, I'm always thinking about security and protection. So those are the sort of things my big drivers. But that was about it. It wasn't really a controversy. It's more or less communication, and once they saw what I did and what we needed to do, and now they love it. We've turned this other space, which is a little meeting room, more into a kind of a very flex space. We have new tables and chairs that are configurable, and we can have it for meetings. We can have it if somebody wants to go in and just read in this particular space that's visible. And then, of course, if we need a meeting, we'll turn it into a meeting room. And so our biggest thing is we're maxing out our space. Our space is constantly in need by the community, which is, like I said, a good problem to have.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm Kari Kohlman. We spoke on the phone, so it's nice to see face to face, even though it's a computer screen. I have a few questions. My first one is, when material is legally permissible but deeply offensive to many residents, how should a director respond?
Well, that's why we have a very strong collection development policy. That's why we're very good about making sure that what we are getting for the collection for the community is reflective of the needs of the community. And so my thing is trying to stay ahead of that curve and making sure we're buying what is needed and what's an appropriate fit for, in this case, Germantown, versus, let's say, when it was Botellas and asked the managed services space, the collection development policy was basically being driven out of Riverside, California, which of course is a different type of community, different types of life, and so on compared to the Deep South. And of course, obviously, your location here, and we need to make sure the collection is reflective of those needs of the community. So I think the biggest way to handle that is buy the things that work for the community. And I think that's the biggest driver to me is to take care of that. And if there are issues about a book, the best way to handle it is to follow the policies. So if the material needs to be looked at or something, let's go to the channels to make those decisions and let the board examine it. I think that the director, in my capacity, is to be that conduit of information, saying, hey, we got this question about this item, this is what they wrote, this is materials, let's follow our policies and procedures to see what we need to do with it. If there's something we need to do differently, if it needs to be put somewhere else or what have you, or if it needs to be pulled, I don't know. I mean, I haven't had that, knock on wood, I've not had to really deal with that in my career. I mean, it is something I prepared for. I've certainly talked to enough of my peers over the years of what they need to do, and that's why I want to be proactive. I want to be not reactive, I want to be proactive, and so that's one of the things I need to make sure whatever is getting purchased from the get-go, is that what the community wants? And I want to make sure of that. And do I believe it? Of course I do, but I also believe that to be a truly effective library, we need to make sure that's why it's a local library system. It's not a big system, it's a local library control with the policies and procedures that are related to that. And once we do that, I think that that makes things, puts things in a better space, and we'll go from there. So that's how I feel about it. And I've worked in academia, so obviously our collection development system policies are quite different, and there were things that sure did we buy out, wouldn't want my kids to read, of course not. But then again, we're also a university or a college age appropriate, and that was a different thing you had to purchase for curriculum. Public library space, collection development policy, different, completely different situation. And so my belief is, let's make sure we get what people want and let them have input. And we have a patron form, acquisitions form for people who want to put in materials that maybe we haven't bought yet. And so we're allowing patrons, we just put that up recently, so they can put in requests for materials they want to, but they have to be a library card holder first, but that way we can incorporate that into our purchasing. It's called patron-driven acquisitions, PDA, and I'm a big believer because my background originally was in acquisitions and collection development, so I have a lot of strong interest in making sure we do that right, because it makes our jobs a lot easier at the end of the day when we do that correctly the first go around, and that way we can move on and look on the bigger things that we need to do as an organization for our funding dollars, among other things. So that's how I feel. So hopefully I got your question answered there. If not, I can definitely follow up.
What year? What year did you get your master's in library science?
Yes.
What year was that?
LSU, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My area of specialization was all things special libraries, but I'm also a credentialed school librarian in the state of Louisiana, so I'm actually a K through 12 school librarian, at least in the state of Louisiana. So I have nearly 60 hours, now let's see, about 60 hours in the library science field.
And that was in what year? Is that
1995, and I'm currently enrolled for my MBA program right now through Grand Canyon University.
My next few questions are in regards to homeschool.
Okay.
We have a large homeschool community here. In fact, I homeschool. So can you give an example of a successful homeschool program you've implemented or would like to implement?
In the last 18 months, we actually have implemented a homeschooling program, which has been very popular. We started off initially with probably about 5 or 6 active students in our homeschooling program. The last time I checked, that had gone up to about 30 to 35 children that are involved in our homeschooling program. So we have really developed a very program that's very in tune with the needs of the homeschoolers. In fact, interesting fact is the recent librarian I hired for the Youth Services Children's Department, she does homeschooling. So she's in the community and she's been able to help us really grow the program to reflect that, and she's done a phenomenal job. So we have a lot of things that we have developed programming wise. We've actually been able to get some grant money, or actually money from Kiwanis recently, with programmable robots, 3D printers, and we're going to try to tailor that or target that towards the homeschool environment. So we're trying to get some supplementary resources that would support the homeschooling program, but it also will support those who are in regular school too. So we're trying to make sure that reflects all the needs of everybody, but we really are trying to target the homeschoolers so we can have a better program. So we're going to continue to grow that in the future, and I'm very happy to see where it's going. We've got really good feedback. I have a great persons involved in that, and we'll continue to grow that. We also have the Montessori school, local Montessori school, that comes in basically several times a week for programming, books, checkouts, things like that. So, and we've been growing our ability to offer things through the Germantown Regional Municipal School System too. So we're trying to grow that too. I've been able to stabilize my staffing situation so that we can start to do a little bit more of that, because my background is education, and I really like to continue to identify opportunities with the local school systems along with the homeschoolers so that we can continue to evolve and grow that, because it's a really great opportunity for the library to really reflect the needs of the community and also be able to bring more people in, otherwise they may not come to the library or have those resources. We're trying to also improve our databases so that homeschoolers will have more access to e-resources, among other things, and that's something that I'm a firm believer in. And, that sort of thing, information literacy, all that sort of thing. So we have a lot of different things we have in the fire for that right now, but I'm very excited that we've been able to do some very significant growth in that, and it's just, I think, the start of it.
How would you identify the actual needs of the homeschool community rather than assuming what they want?
Oh, we're getting feedback. We have actually asked them to give us feedback. We have survey forms that we can give them, so we're adding that into the mix so that we can see what their needs are. We are actually working in the board, we're working on some surveys. We just set up some subcommittees dealing with facilities and programs and technologies and collections. And one of the things we're going to do under more of the facilities is we're going to do a survey. And one of the areas we're targeting will be the homeschooling situation, homeschool environment, to see what other types of programs or resources or space would possibly identify so that we put that in our planning process. So that way they're getting the support they need to be successful. And again, we've seen good growth. We're looking at maybe eventually doubling it again. We're very excited about growing that and putting some additional dollars. But I want to get some surveys out here this year to identify what we need to do as a group, as an organization, so that we can start putting it into our longer term growth where do we need to put some funding dollars in? Here's some other things we need to do, or there are other organizations we need to reach out to within the community to make that happen. So that is where we're trying to go overall with the organization, or at least for that part of it.
Thank you. You've answered my other questions that I had through those 2 questions, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Move on. Next.
Good morning. I think it's the morning. Yeah, we are. Bill Marquardt, been on the library board here for a few years now. You've talked about the difference between a public library and a college library, about the difference in the way that they operate, the types of materials that are involved in the collection between those two.
Right.
What can you tell me about the difference between a local library, a public library, and a school library in an elementary school or middle school?
Right. Well, first off, I think with a public library setting, we kind of go from age 1 to 99 kind of deal. So you have a very large spectrum of age groups and interests and needs, and so obviously collection development policy and the things that we do is going to be quite broad in that respect, but we also have very specific guidelines within different departments, particularly with children and so on, and young adults. And so we want to make sure we're working with those groups appropriately, either through collections, through programming, through resources, and so on, and making sure their ability to do things like checking materials not restricted to the age appropriate, and let the parents handle that, because that is something the parents need to be involved in at those age levels. Whereas a school librarian, a former school librarian, I was basically a high school librarian. Obviously, the materials are going to be reflective of what is needed by the children in that age group, and it's going to be a little more, especially since there is, as parents are not on site, like say in a public library space, then whatever materials you're buying for a school library is going to be obviously fairly focused, very specific age appropriate, and make sure that the collection development is reflecting what are the school's needs, whether it's what kind of reading programs they have, what kind of things in math or science or history or whatever. You want to make sure you buy materials that reflect those types of things within the collection. Of course, as a former school librarian, I spent a lot of time teaching students how to find materials, so I did that and taught them these are the resources you use to find materials, how to go about deciding what works best for you. I go into the classroom sometimes, or a lot of times the classes that come to the library. So I would have an hour to spend to teach them library resources. What does it mean? How do you go about making those decisions? What's the reflection of that? And I work with the teachers to make sure we're identifying what we need to discuss. And of course, we want to make sure whatever we were purchasing in a school library setting is what was the needs and reflective of what the parents want. And of course, as in a public library setting, it's the same thing. You want to make sure you identify those needs, make sure you're purchasing materials that are appropriate for the age, and so on. So there's a bit of a difference, and of course in an academic library it's a whole other different level. So I've pretty much worked in most different types of library type spaces, and but the public library, I've been very surprised how much I really enjoyed it. I really love it. It's really, I found a calling that I didn't know if I wanted to do or not, but these last 4 years have given me a lot of runway to develop things and programs and everything else, and we get excellent feedback, all the time. And so I know we got a survey back from the city recently about library operations, and they gave us excellent scores across the board about how we were operating, and that was just from the city alone. But we have surveys that we can use to see what else people are saying. But we're constantly looking at ways to evolve and improve feedback loop, close the loop on what people's wants and needs or want, and making sure that's part of our planning process. And so I think that's the key thing here, and then that's the sort of thing I would come back to the board and say, okay, we've done some new surveys, we've developed this, we will work with the board to develop the survey questions, and then we can come back and say, this is the feedback we've gotten, this is where we might want to look at what we need to target our resources to make them better, and then we can also, see where gaps are we need or whatever. And I'm going to tell you right now, libraries is a continual improvement model. We're constantly improving. That's the whole process. We're moving the needle, as they say, and that's my biggest thing. I've moved the needle quite a bit in the last 4 years. I've had a great staff. That's what makes a difference. And that's where we do a lot of staff training, staff development. So those are the sort of things I really believe in, so that at the end of the day, we can identify successfully that we're fulfilling the mission of the library and making sure we're supporting the school needs and the community needs and the homeschoolers and so on. So it's a multifaceted process. People say, the biggest comment I get sometimes is, you must read books a lot. And I said, no. Thanks for breaking it to you. I said, I am busy from the moment I walk in the door to the moment I walk out. I always have my computer with me, I'm always doing something at home with work, or I'm sending up an email, so it's a constant process, and I'm very fastidious about that, but I'm also very open-minded and trying to figure out how to solve problems. I'll bring you my viewpoint, but that's my viewpoint, but I also need your viewpoint. It's a joint decision process. I mean, and that's what's important. Communication, good reporting mechanisms, goal setting, figuring out what we need to go with the budget, listen to what the patrons of the community want. At the end of the day, that's what makes the difference, and that's what makes a library successful as an organization.
Thank you. I also have a question about collections policy, about the materials collections policy. We have had a history here in Lapeer of professional staff people who, as a group, have been responsible for the materials which are included in our collection. They've gone through and analyzed everything, looked at the various recommendations and so on from American Library Association and others. And it seems recently this board has determined that it is up to them to be involved in this material selection policy. I would like your perspective on that. I think it's important for professionals who know what they're doing to be involved in the selection process, and I am not competent to make any of those decisions, and I sit on this board.
Well, my feeling is that it's definitely a critical needs area for the board to be involved in setting the policies and what have you for the collection of the library. Now, as to how it's been affected recently, obviously whoever comes on board as a new director will need to take a look to see where that stands. But I want to make sure whatever policies that we do implement are reflected to what board wants, because that's at the end of the day, you're the ones who set the ultimate goals and objectives. And so, as a professional librarian, I will bring you what I can from my perspective. I've always believed in keeping it a balanced approach to make sure, but we also want to make sure, is it reflective of the community needs? And I think at the end of the day, that's the biggest driver, and that's when I can probably successfully say I can bring forward from Germantown, is that we've been very good about being that proactive and making sure we're purchasing and make sure we're doing what at the end of the day, the money that's being purchased for this is what the community overall and the board wants at the end of the day. So I think that's the key thing for this, is to be very successful in that, and to have that ability to successfully implement those policies. And so, and if there's been some disconnect, that's obviously a thing that would probably need to be looked at and improved upon, because I want to make sure what you just suggested, among other things, let's make sure we're doing our jobs and making sure we're doing what it. As a professional librarian, my job is to do a good job with the money, to make sure we're doing our job, reflective of what the community wants, and to make sure our policies are in alignment with what overall the city and the county and so on wants. And I want to make sure that's the case for this area. So, and I've done, I can say very confidently that we've done a good job here in the last 4 years. And so, and I think the thing too is just a sense of stability. How to do this and make sure it's done appropriately and done in a timely manner, and not just say, okay, we'll look into it, which we would, but obviously make it an action item that when we come back to the next time we meet, you have an update on where things stand and constantly giving you that feedback and close that loop. Is there something with the collection in particular we need to look at? We can definitely take a look at that and see how we can use that as a means to adjust things to reflect what people's needs are. So I don't know if that gives you the answer you want, but I do think it's important. It comes down to making sure we're communicating that directly and making sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to that.
Also concerned about restricting access to materials in a library by either moving them or otherwise restricting access to materials in a library.
Well, like when it comes to certain things, like with the children's collection, again, it's we try to target what is appropriate for that, and then what is a different age group. We'll make sure we're focusing on that, and it isn't so much a quote unquote restricting access as to maybe making sure that it's limited to access to what the parents want, particularly when it comes to anybody of age. And so I want to make sure whatever we're doing, it's still available, but you may need to get parental authorization to be able to have access to that material. So I think that's the kind of the key thing, and we want the permissionable items to be able to take care of it that way. And that way we're not restricting access, but we're just making sure it's age-appropriate access at the end of the day. And it's a constant process to improve things, to make things happen. And I think that's the end of the day, and it comes back to the communications and transparency, and being as transparent as possible when you're doing that. So, and it's a natural process. It takes time. If there's things that need to be identified and improved upon, obviously that's going to be put on an action item thing that we want to make sure it's taken care of. So that's what I've done over the years, and I'm at the direction of the board, and that's how we're going to make it happen.
Thank you. I guess I'm done.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Carol Brown. I hope you don't mind that I would like a little bit of personal information. I'd like to know if you're married, if you have a family. Tell us about that, please.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Would you mind repeating that?
This is going to be personal questions. I hope you don't
Okay.
mind. I'd like to know if you're married and if you have a family.
Yes, I've been married for 33 years. Met my wife Joan in New Orleans back in the early 1990s. We met through church, and we've got 2 children we adopted, special needs children, when we lived in Texas. One was 4, one was a year and a half old when we adopted them. They were special needs. Their parents were unfortunately drug addicts. We had to go through some, obviously, training because we foster care the children, and then we were able to adopt them, and they became part of our family in 2006. And due to their special needs, they've had to go through a lot of therapy and counseling and things like that over the years. And now they're grown up. They're in Florida, so we try to see them as much as we can. We love them very much. We do the best we can to support them. One's in the Tallahassee area, and the other one's in Miami. He's trying to get into some sort of programs to help him with training and things like that. So we keep in touch with them. And my wife is an artist. She used to be a school teacher, and then she worked for food services in North Dakota when I was at Minot State for a number of years. And now she's retired, and she does art now. So, we're trying to keep ourselves busy and occupied, and we like to travel once in a while, among other things. And so that's kind of it for now. So yeah, but can't believe it's been 30 years plus now. Don't know where the time goes.
For answering that, and I admire you for your foster care and adoption. That's great.
Thank you.
The reason I asked those questions too has to do with my next question about you've moved several times to several different states, so I wondered if your family was okay with all those moves and stuff. And
Yeah.
Can you tell me why you moved so much? Why you moved so many different states?
Opportunities. I was in North Dakota for 8 years, and then unfortunately that position was did what's called academic bankruptcy. So the position I was in there was eliminated. Otherwise, I may still be in North Dakota. So they did not fill that position after I left because they made a lot of new alignments. And you can talk to Dr. Lenore Kozon. She was my boss before that happened in North Dakota, Minot. She can fill you in on all that, what happened. They had a new administrative team came in and so on. Dr. Fuller was the one who hired me, and they brought in a different president towards the end of my tenure. And then I was in Florida for 4 years, but I wanted to do something different, and I was ready to move on. And this was an opportunity to move into the public library space, and so that's what I wanted to do. And I've been happy where I am. I'm ready to kind of find a place where I can retire. Put a capstone on my career. Essentially, is what I'm looking at doing. And now it's just my wife and I and 2 Pomeranians, and so we're looking for an opportunity to find a place for home, and then that's where we'll stay. So that's where we are at this point in our lives.
Do you have other relatives here in Michigan? Do you have other relatives?
Well, Michigan, I don't. My wife and I are fine. We would definitely love to move there because we're all used to colder weather. Like I said, 8 years in North Dakota. We did pretty well, and it gives us an opportunity. We have some friends that are over in Wisconsin. We have friends, obviously a lot of friends in North Dakota. We have friends in Minnesota, friends in Pennsylvania and New York, so we can be closer to them. And we still can get back to Louisiana and Florida as needed. And like I said, the next opportunity to go camping, that's one of the things we'd like to do. So we're looking forward to be able to do some of that and finish off my MBA program here with Grand Canyon University. So.
You mentioned
Yes.
camping. Camping in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is wonderful.
Amen.
So, thank you.
Actually, that was the first thing that came in my mouth was that I would love to go to UP. That's on my radar. That's where I want to definitely go and spend some time when we have time to do that. So
That's all
I
I
would look
have.
forward to-
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that concludes all of our questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer each of them as thoroughly as you did. Are there any questions that you have for us?
I know I've been talking to the recruiter, so she's given me a lot of the answers. I know she's going to continue to have a discussion. I'm just basically want to know when you think you might want to have somebody onboarded, or what's your time frame and all that, and would you be able to help me continue on with my schooling to cover that? I know there's a credentialing thing I need to go through too, and I understand that's not a problem for me. But I mean, that's only a couple of questions I have for you right now.
Yeah, well, I do know we have been without a director. In March, it'll be a year. So as soon as possible, I would say, is what we are looking for. The sooner, the better, because we really need to fill that position for the staff members and also for us. We just need somebody in that spot. So for us, I would say the sooner the better. It isn't something that we are looking to prolong or put off to the side. As far as education reimbursement, that would be something the board would have to discuss. And you would have to let us know what exactly that is. I think there might be some kind of certification. Michigan does require certain certifications that many other states do not. Our previous director was from Texas, and Texas doesn't require those, so I'm assuming she might have gotten those somehow. So I'm assuming that there will be a chance for us to help out in that aspect, but again, that would have to be up to the board as a whole to determine. But if you just let us know what it is that you're kind of looking at, we can, if we decide as a board to go into the negotiations with the contract with you, that's something that would all kind of be able to be looked at that time. So.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Any
other questions?
I think that's it. If I have any further questions, I have Colleen's contact info and email and stuff, so I'll definitely could do that. So no, I think at this point that's plenty. And if you have any further questions for me, please let me know.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, and we will be talking to you soon.
Okay, I appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let us know when we can get this signed off.
Yeah. I'm just taking it all with me just to be.
Okay. Is there any discussion regarding any questions you guys have, any concerns, anything you want to?
I wish I would have asked them what his salary wants are.
Yeah, that would probably be something that would in negotiations, we'll probably find out. I think, what are we asking right now? What are we offering right now? It's 130 is where we're at. I believe Danielle was at 110, and Andrew maybe around 98,000 a year. I'm not quite 100% sure, but I do believe she was under 100,000. Anything else you guys want to discuss?
He seems really thorough.
He's very thorough. He's very thorough with his answers, I would. So I don't think communication would be an issue.
No.
Seems to communicate very well.
Yeah.
Everything. So, is there anything else? Yes, we do. So that would have been our board comments. Anybody have any other comments, board comments?
The only comment I've got, I guess, is I'm concerned that we have a choice of exactly one candidate to fill this vacancy.
Sure. And
I don't think that's an adequate sample of anything.
well, it has been a year, and so
I understand that.
at this point,
I understand that. But choosing between one candidate is not a choice.
it could be another year before we get another one.
The second candidate was lacking in experience of years, is that correct?
He had his master's degree, and according to Michigan library law, and for a district library, you have to, after you get your, pardon?
For level 6.
Yeah, for a level 6, which is what we are. You have to have a master's degree, and you have to have 4 years of library work after that. Unfortunately, he got his master's degree in May of this year, so he obviously does not have the 4-year library. We are going to, I think, try to talk with the state and see if because he has very extensive library work prior to, see if, because, the state has stated that there is a shortage in directors right now, and it is very difficult to find them. They're suggesting just offering whatever they want, because, you just want to get one. But I think maybe they might be able to work with us on maybe being able to interview him for the position, because he doesn't have the 4 years, maybe there's some sort of a waiver there because of the previous work history that he has. That's something obviously that the attorney's going to have to look into and talk to the state about possibly. But that would be great, because then we'd have a second person that we could interview. But at this point, it's difficult, with what the state of Michigan requires, as opposed to other states. Obviously, they don't have any levels or anything in most states, so Michigan's a little bit different. Is there anything else? Okay, it brings us to our next public comment time. We get 3 minutes to speak. If there's anybody from the public who would like to speak, you can do so now at this time.
Good morning. I'm Frank Lapeer, resident of the city of Lapeer. If you have a viable candidate, I didn't see any major red flags. Full disclosure, I am a librarian with 30 years experience. The only concern is, it sounds like he is very heavily influenced from the academic field, although he has some experience in public. Policies in academia are significantly different than policies in public library. Laws in Michigan are different. Wish we could have gotten someone here in Michigan. That would have been ideal. What I would have liked to have heard, instead of illegal questions being asked of the candidate, is what kind of experience do you have in managing multi-year budgets, large fiscal budgets, from development to board approval to implementation? That wasn't asked. We are a district library. He's a city library. The budget could come from the city. We don't know that because we didn't ask that question. So, I don't know. It's so frustrating to stand here as someone who fully understands the big picture and see what's happening, and to understand that we do have viable candidates here in Michigan. There is not a shortage of librarians, or qualified librarians for that matter. Your salary is more than fair. There's something more here than what we're seeing at face value. And until we look in the mirror as a community and as a board, as a library, and start truly doing self-evaluation here, this is what we're going to get. So we have probably 8 very qualified librarians who live in the district. But we're not at the table. Why are we not at the table? It's just a shame.
Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak?
Kelly Nolan, Lapeer Township. I'd like to point out that traditionally asking if an interview candidate is married and has children is not usually warranted, has nothing to do with their ability to do their job.
Anybody else from the public like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment time. All I need is a motion to adjourn.
So
Supported by Bill.